This video shows some new features that are being introduced in the upcoming release of VMware Cloud Director. Let's start with some new features of the provider portal. VMware Cloud Director has now enhanced UI support for NSXT. In the provider portal as well as in the tenant portal, we can now manage edge devices in NSXT org VDCs through the UI. This includes additional service settings like distributed firewall and VPN configurations. For example, you can now change and edit firewall rules of an NSXT-based firewall. In the provider VDC settings, it is now possible to edit the IOPS settings through the user interface. You can select a storage policy and edit the settings to enable IOPS limiting. Optionally, you can define if IOPS limiting should also impact the placement logic of Cloud Director. These settings will automatically apply to all the children organization VDCs. It is, however, possible to override the settings based on an organization VDC. The next version of Container Service Extension for Cloud Director will support VMware Tanzu Kubernetes services. A new type of policies has been introduced to prepare the provider VDC for these Kubernetes clusters. In the tenant portal of VMware Cloud Director, a new top menu entry called Networking has been introduced. This bundles all the network-related settings and allows the tenant user to very intuitively configure their organization VDCs, edge gateways, and data center groups. The same settings can be reached in the VDC context, which includes the same UI for NSXT and NSXV edge gateway configuration. As a tenant user, you now can create named disks and attach them to multiple virtual machines to create shared disks in between them, for example, for clustering purposes. In the named disk sections of the tenant portal, you can create a new named disk, select the storage policy and the size of the named disk, and then optionally flag the named disk as shareable, which allows it to be attached to up to 8 virtual machines. Once the named disk is created, you can now attach it to a virtual machine. If the disk is marked as shareable, it is possible to attach the same disk to another virtual machine. The VDC group settings now also allow a tenant user to configure distributed firewall rules through the UI. In the security settings, it's possible to define IP sets, security groups, and application port profiles that can be used in the firewall rules. As usual, in Cloud Director, a service provider can enable the use of distributed firewall on a per tenant base.